Hey everyone, how y'all doing? So the demo for Like a Dragon Pirates in Yakuza, uh, wait, actually, is it Like a Dragon Pirate Fuck, do I know? Listen, I bought a copy of this game physically that I don't have it right now because I actually ordered it from Japan, and in the cover it says Pirates in Hawaii, I believe. So I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna call it Pirates in Hawaii. Regardless, they released the demo. I've already tested on my PS5, and I've also tested on PC. This isn't the first time I'm opening this game. And the thing is, I do actually legitimately want to highlight some things that I do. Actually, one second. Let me just double. I might need to reduce the volume of the game just a little bit, just in case it doesn't fucking overwhelm my audio. But there's a couple of things that I do appreciate. So, um, I've played Infinite Wealth, and Infinite Wealth is a good game. I like the game quite a lot. But there was actually one thing about that game that was kind of concerning me. And that is the fact that Hawaii can get a little bit fucking demanding. Surprisingly. Like, there are some spots, funnily enough, the beach is actually one of them, where sometimes it would actually overwhelm the GPU. Like, I think it's in one of the supermarkets where sometimes you could. This was especially noticeable on the PS5, where the frame rate would drop what seemed like was like 50s or 40 FPS. At least that's how it felt, and I've always assumed that it might be because of the population density and something like that, which could potentially indicate there might be like a CPU limitation. But that was mostly an assumption, of course. I don't actually have a way of like actually measuring the fucking um, over the usage of each component of the PS5 because I don't have an overlay software. Now I do have an overlay software on my PC, and I did notice some moments that felt like the game was being bottlenecked by the CPU, especially when not in this case, but whenever I play on my 1080p monitor, which can go up to 165 FPS. Yeah, it doesn't go to it doesn't stick to 165 at all times, and it's not because it's GPU limited. It's a lot of times it's because it is CPU limited. And I've had this issue with Yakuza games ever since the fucking Dragon Engine for a while, so this doesn't really surprise me. But when I did play it on my 4K monitor, there were definitely some moments where it would hitch. It would definitely like dip a little bit below the 60s, and again, sometimes it did seem like it was a CPU limitation, which is ironic given how I have a 7900X, so it's not necessarily a case of I don't have a CPU that's strong enough. Well, I mean, I guess on some technicality, you could say, oh, if you have a CPU that's powerful enough, it can override any of the fucking issues with optimizing the frame rate that games may have. You can argue that, but regardless, this game, on the other hand, I actually have not seen that many performance issues. Um, like not at all. At least it seems smooth to me personally. Now, uh, this resolution in specific is not the best example. To be fair, it's not a very good example to showcase the game performing reasonably well. But when I tested this on my 4K monitor, this entire beach area seemed to run fine. I was able to get at 60 FPS. It didn't have moments where it would suddenly fucking just skyrocket. Because I remember, like, in fact, I even remember doing certain cutscenes depending on which angle it was being presented at. Suddenly, my GPU would go to 99%, and I would get like frame rates of like 41 FPS. You know what I mean? Hawaii can get pretty demanding for a PS4 game. This can get pretty fucking demanding. Regardless, there are a couple of other things I do want to note about this game that were interesting. So, of course, in case you haven't noticed, it's not obvious. I'm running this on a Linux machine. You can tell by the fucking Mango Hut overlay. I don't think anyone's surprised that this game would be running well on Linux, but just in case, yeah, it runs well. All of the Yakuza games run well, honestly, at this point. I can't use HDR, not yet. I have heard that there was a merge made to enable HDR on Wayland. So I don't think you need GameScope anymore, but we'll have to wait until that specific version of Wayland that has that specific merge request is available. I don't know when it's going to be available. When it happens, I'll try to test HDR as much as I can. And with that said, my experience with HDR on Linux has not been very smooth, so I don't necessarily expect it to fix everything, but whatever. What I actually wanted to talk about is, yes, this is in the graphics settings. Uh, they actually have a specific settings for performance improvement settings, which is interesting because uh, typically in the past, if you go to, I think here it would say more settings or something like that. You would go here and you would see an option for choosing an upscaler, and I believe in Yakuza 5 you could also change the Fidelity FX CAS or something like that. Um, though I'm not sure if that was available on every Yakuza game since then. But regardless, everything related to upscaling and frame generation is right here. Ah, there's the render scale. I think that's what I was specifically talking about. So yeah, if you're someone who, if you don't vibe with this shit, they've completely segregated these settings. So that's kind of funny. I actually find that to be really pretty funny. But regardless, it does have FSR1, which you probably shouldn't use, but there is one advantage to using FSR1, and that is the fact that if I select this, and if I go to detailed graphic settings, I can actually pick which one of these anti-aliasing solutions. Don't use TAA. You shouldn't use TAA at all. But you do have the option for. I mean, I say that, but honestly, there are some games where the rendering becomes fucking broken if you don't use TAA because the game was designed around this, uh, personally speaking, very flawed anti-aliasing solution. But you don't need me to say that. Uh, yeah, you can pick one of these anti-aliasing solutions. And I'm not saying that the image quality is going to look great by doing this, but it is something that you do have. Because if I pick FSR2, this option is completely locked. It's completely locked because FSR2 and FSR3, they use their own specific Fidelity FX super resolution anti-aliasing solution that's pretty much locked. You can't really pick a different anti-aliasing solution because that's just how these things works. FSR1 and FSR2 are very different in a lot of ways. I do want to mention one thing though. Yeah, so FSR2, you can go up to quality. If you pick FSR 1.2, sorry, 3.1.2, which is one of the things I really want to highlight, because in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and Gaiden, both have FSR 3, but it's not 3.1. And the problem with 3.0, the first edition of FSR, is that there are only really two benefits that it offers. The first one is that you can pick native instead of quality. In terms of performance, I don't think this will actually help, but if for whatever reason you might find FSR's anti-aliasing solution better than the other ones, maybe because compared to multi-sampling anti-aliasing, it might cost less while also producing a reasonable enough image quality. Maybe you think it looks better than temporal anti-aliasing, and I don't think it'll look better than MLAA. Maybe it might look better than FXAA. I haven't actually tested. In my experience, it never does. But regardless, if for whatever fucking reason you prefer their anti-aliasing solution, then you can pick native, and it's not gonna downscale the. It's not gonna not downscale. Sorry, it's not going to render from a lower resolution and upscale it to whatever resolution you're targeting. That's the advantage of native, of FSR in specific from the previous two games. However, also it's that and also the fact that you have frame generation, which I'm just gonna tell you right now, please don't enable frame generation on a fucking Yakuza game. Like, don't enable frame generation on any games that are very sensitive to inputs. Fighting games, action games, hack and slash stuff like that. Don't make your experience fucking miserable. But if you want it, there you go. You can use FSR3 frame generation if you like. I don't think you should, but you can. But regardless, the problem now, these two advantages were cool of FSR3, I guess, but there was one issue with FSR3. The first one is that if you wanted to use FSR3 frame generation, you had to enable the upscaling. So for example, if I pick none, and something went wrong. The image quality changed for some reason, and something went wrong. I don't know what happened there, but regardless, maybe nothing happened. It's just placebo effect. But regardless, if I disable any upscaling solution, I can still use frame generation. But you couldn't do that before. You really did have to enable FSR. And the thing is, a lot of people would argue that FSR doesn't look as good as XCSS and DLSS, and so if you wanted to use FSR3's frame generation, which there are actually some advantages using that over NVIDIA's ones, some people have noticed that the input latency seems to be a little bit better, but I think that might be depend from game to game. I've also seen some people report that some of the motion artifacts, just the UI getting a little bit bugged out for some games seems to be less common with FSR3 frame generation. I haven't personally verified if that's true or not because I don't fucking use this technology. I just avoid it like a plague. But there are some people that seem to actually prefer this over DLSS and DLSS frame generation to be specific. But the fact that before you had to enable the upscaler was a problem because while maybe you could argue that AMD's frame generation might be better than Nvidia's, the upscaling 100% is not. And so yeah, that's one advantage of FSR 3.1.2. This upscaling version also does improve the image quality, but I will tell you right now that at least in my very small experience that I made comparing FSR2 with FSR 3.1 in this game in specific, I did not notice a ton of improvements, if I'm being honest. However, I will also say that this game, after I had the time to like really properly assess, I realized that this game doesn't exactly have very detailed textures. Like for example, this one. Okay, let me just double check that this doesn't have any upscaler enabled, just to be sure, because I wanna show you guys exactly what I mean. And also, I'm fucking disabling frame generation. Oh, so it's the frame generation that's causing the game to suddenly be fucking bright for no reason. That's odd. That's a very odd behavior. I don't think it affects the game too much, but regardless, if you actually look this game close enough, and again, this isn't using any upscaling technology. Let me just double check it. All the settings are set to high. Okay, this is one of the fucking issues with I've always had with Yakuza games, that for some reason they just suddenly fucking they downplay the shadow quality and geometry when you change certain settings. It's really annoying. All right, now it's maxed out. All right, it looks a little bit better, but even then, I wouldn't exactly describe this game as having like super highly detailed textures and stuff like that. Honestly, I'm kind of used to that, but like it is something that I've noticed for a while. I assume a lot of this is probably because it's kind of what allows this game to run at PS4, which it's a sad reality. But yeah, if I enable like, for example, this, I'm not even fuck it. I'm going to quality. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, it's gonna look worse. Definitely going to look worse. But at the same time, this upscaler is working with a game that already does not have a very high quality render. So I'm not gonna fully blame, because even if I pick XCSS, I still personally think that this doesn't look very good. And XCSS is the one upscaler that people say is better than FSR in a lot of instances. And in some instances, I can somewhat agree, but like in this case, I'm personally speaking, I'm not noticing a ton of improvements. I'm just not. And so, what I would say, and this is something that I've always said about upscalers, if you're playing this game at 4K, these really high resolutions, I actually think upscaling is pretty viable. I played both Gaiden and Infinite Wealth using FSR enabled, and you guys have watched my video talking about video game graphics and how I think that in a lot of ways games are actually looking worse now. And I did mention that upscaling is one of the main reasons why. But regardless, if I'm playing at 4K, I'm actually okay. It actually, I'm perfectly fine with playing really high resolutions with upscalers because at that point I feel like the game has enough. The upscaling algorithm has enough pixel data that it can accurately recreate the image to look like 4K. I'm okay with that. But if you're playing at, in this case, it's 2560 by 1080p. Don't do it. Don't enable upscaling. If you really fucking have to, maybe try to, you know, reduce some of these settings, but don't enable on upscaler. It's not really gonna give you a very good experience. But I did want to talk about that because, you know, it was something that I noticed. Now, one thing that I also want to talk about is the combat because I did notice a couple of things. Now, one thing is that Majima, at least so far, doesn't seem to have a grab command. Because if you click, oh wait, it does have. Okay, he does have. It's just that if you hold circle for long enough, it'll. Okay, that makes sense now. That actually completely makes sense. I was wrong. So, one other thing that I've noticed, and I'm not sure if the microphone is gonna pick up, is that this game, much like a Dragon Gaiden, unfortunately has a little bit of input latency. So if I click square, hang on, dude, get out of the way. I'm trying to fucking test this for a YouTube video. So I'm clicking square. Yeah, it's taking a while. It's taking a little bit while. And this was something that I've noticed since Like a Dragon Gaiden. And I assume that the reason why they designed it this way is because with Majima, for example, if I hold square for long enough, it'll launch the opponent into the air. If I click triangle hard enough, it'll do this. And, of course, if I hold circle enough, it'll spin. So the impression that I'm getting here is the delay there is actually meant to allow the game to recognize what command you're actually trying to do. So if you're trying to do a normal input, just click once. But if you're trying to do a hold, you hold it for as long as you need. And so the delay is kind of meant to allow the game to recognize what command you're actually trying to do, which I understand, but it is definitely jarring to play like this. To this day, I still have a hard time adjusting to this latency. It's almost to the point where I'm considering just playing this game on PC just so I can play with 165 FPS, just because at that point how much of latency 165 millisecond latency it has, it should be low enough that maybe I won't notice as much. But when I'm playing with a 16.6 millisecond latency, I can just tell. Let's stay away for a while. I can just fucking tell. But regardless, let's talk about the other things about the combat system that I thought was interesting. So triangle is a melee now, which is very interesting. I think the Judgment Games triangle is also a little bit of melee, if I'm not mistaken. But this game, like, it almost feels like an entire fucking light to heavy attack when you click triangle. It really does feel that way. And what makes this so interesting is the fact that if you click square and then you follow up with a triangle, the first input for a triangle is going to be the heavy attack that's tied to however many square inputs you select, like with every Yakuza game. But if you click triangles fast enough, it'll just jump to the normal melee that triangle has. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. And also, if you melee 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4. Shut. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll launch to the air. Okay, it didn't do it because I got fucking hit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll launch to the air. And then if you click triangle or square, Majima will jump to the air automatically. And so this game definitely does have air combos. I am expecting Majima's combat to be even more complex the more you unlock it. Because, for example, what I mentioned earlier, let's click square, square, triangle. That's just one heavy attack input. And obviously with a lot of Yakuza games, eventually, as you unlock, you're going to, like, the heavy attacks are going to become even more multi-input. so you can add even more attacks. And so I'm actually wondering how this will end up affecting the triangle melee. Like, will it be as flexible as it is right now to connect with this triangle melee? Is what I'm wondering. Ah, that's. I was expecting to do that dodge thingy. Majima is very fucking flexible. He's a very fast player, which is very interesting. So yeah, those were those were the things that I did notice. I'm actually imagining this game being. Oh, one other thing that I did notice. Let me actually try again with those fucking assholes. Is that some heavy attacks seems to have higher stun. For example, that guy was stunned for a second, and so this might allow for more flexible combos. However, at the same time, usually when you launch the opponents with a heavy attack, it does seem like the opponent does kind of move to the map a little bit, so it might be just a tiny bit easier. Not easier. It might be a little bit harder to connect easy combos. You might need to you need to practice a little bit just to make sure, you know, the amount of distance that you need to put for certain attacks. Um, the exact frame data of the game just to be sure. But I don't know. I'm actually seeing a future where this game might be kind of wild with combos. Obviously, I'm not saying this will be like fucking Devil May Cry tier or anything like that, but I actually do think this will might surpass Lost Judgments. Because Lost Judgment, one of the things that makes that game's combat so fucking fun is the insane juggle, and this game definitely does have it. And some heavy attacks seem to add extra stun, and then there's also air combos. I don't know, man. I'm seeing a lot of potential with this game. I'm definitely very excited. And so yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to share. The game should be coming out next week, I believe. I will only be able to play once my copy from Japan arrives here, so I might not end up playing this game exactly when it launches. I guess technically I could just play this on PC, but I have this rule with Yakuza games where I will buy the physical copies. I will play the game on the physical copies because I bought the fucking game. I might as well do it. And also, you know, even though in general I think that these games do have pretty good PC ports, at the same time I kind of want to have a stable, reliable experience on consoles that I know I can somewhat rely won't give me any problems potentially. And then later, once I'm done with the game, maybe like a couple of months later, I might want to revisit the game again. I'll play it on PC, crank up the settings, have a good time. That's kind of my experience with the Yakuza games. And so far, it's done me pretty well, managing things like that. And yes, I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting as long as I need. Honestly, I'm not that worried about it because this game comes out like what date on the 20th or 21st. Probably gonna be um actually, now that I think about it, it might be it might actually, I think it's on a Friday. Oh no, I'm gonna miss out on a weekend because I don't think the game's gonna come out exactly on the 21st. It's definitely gonna take a couple of days. I won't have the weekend. Maybe I will just play the PC version. Why the fuck am I doing this to myself? I don't know. I'll see what happens. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share. And I have to fucking pause the game in order to click the stop recording button, because if I don't do that, the mouse will fucking move accordingly to the movements of the game. But anyway, goodbye.